My name is Karin Lewis. I live in Boston and I am an eating disorder specialist. I started the Karin Lewis Eating Disorder Center about 5 years ago. I have a podcast that I started about 3 years ago with over, I think 120 episodes that have come out. It's called Recovery Bites. I'm gonna say it's amazing, not because of me, but because of the guests that come on it. And so this podcast was started trying to help people understand that full recovery is possible. And that full recovery means that life can still have complexities. It's just that you navigate through life now without using your eating disorder. So that was sort of the premise of the podcast. And I've had like activists on and authors and musicians, and so highly encourage you guys to go listen to it. Again, for the guests, I don't want to be like toot my horn. So the first thing I actually want to start with is, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell my story, and I hopefully will not say anything that's triggering. If I do, let me know, because you get triggered out in the world, right? So if you don't want to say something, if you don't want to raise your hand, that's fine, you can come to me after. So I hope I don't trigger anyone. I also want to point out that I'm telling my story. I'm not going to pretend to say my story is just like everybody else's, but this is my experience, and this is why I became an eating disorder therapist, and also why everybody who works for me is fully recovered. I believe lived experience is like an incredible clinical tool, along with all the other stuff. So I do want to say that my narrative comes from, I have white privilege, thin privilege, I'm able-bodied, I'm cisgender, and the reason why I named those right out of the bat, from the beginning, is because none of the models for treatment were designed for anything except for this. And that's really important to acknowledge, because that leaves out a lot of people from going to get treatment, feeling understood to get treatment, or feeling like they can talk about it. So I was in this little niche, but that's it. Gratefully, the field is expanding, gratefully, with diversity. It is not there yet. But again, I always want to start from there, because I do have all of this privilege as I come and give this conversation. I also tell my story because a lot of people think that, there's two kinds of traumas in the world. There's big trauma and there's little trauma. I've had a lot of clients come to me and say, I shouldn't even have an eating disorder. Like, I didn't have some like big massive trauma that happened to me. People often downplay what they're experiencing. And what I want you to notice when I talk about my narrative is I never had a large trauma. A large trauma is sexual assault, a car accident, something happening where basically everybody knows about it, or somebody knows about it, so somebody comes up to you and says, are you okay? It's a big T trauma. Like if I had a broken leg from a car accident, you guys would come up to me and say, are you okay? It's a trauma that can be seen. I grew up with all these little T traumas, which, by the way, a lot of people have. And because of my personality traits, though, I kept things very quiet. I judged myself, it affected my self-esteem. So nobody knew to ask me if I was okay, right? So that's the little trauma, the things that happen every day that we're being bombarded by, but nobody knows about it, so you just swallow it, sit with it, right? It just keeps festering inside. So my narrative, and again, please, my narrative, I'm very, cautious about that. And I'm gonna tell you a story, because literally, I'm gonna start here from I was born a white Jewish girl, whatever. And then I'm gonna go all the way to here when the behaviors start. And the reason why I do that is because this is why it's so difficult to work through an eating disorder. This is also how universal these issues are, that all of us, to some degree, experience. And so, I was born, here I am, and I was, first of all, my lot in life. I'm the youngest in my family, and I'm the only girl. So I was totally babied and cared for when I was little, right? Which I was like, ooh, this is great. Guess what? Wasn't so great when I entered adulthood, and all my friends knew how to be an adult, and I still felt like a little girl. So grew up the youngest and the only girl in my family. Grew up in a affluent community. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Andover, north of here. Grew up in Andover, very affluent community, did not come from a financially affluent family. So already starting with comparisons. Everybody, and I use big words like everybody all the time, you know what I mean? Because that's how my brain internalized it. So my perception is everybody else is better than me. We're sort of like this kind of almost like poor family in this really wealthy town, and so I don't fit in, right? I don't even look like I fit in because, as you can see, I have like a big head of curly hair. This is like really contained today. It's like, and in my perspective, everybody had like blonde, you know, straight, thick. So again, remember, these are small, right? Small little things. But when your whole self-esteem and sense of self is building upon that, you start building an identity with low self-esteem, insecurity, anxiety. So I also was born with the trait of high anxiety. So everything made me nervous. And everything made me nervous to the point that like life became really frightening to me. So I sort of was like retreating back. My parents used to say to me, and by the way, I talk about my family. My family was definitely part of my eating disorder, and they were also a huge part of the recovery. I cannot blame one thing on my eating disorder, right? Because I'm going through this whole, so my parents used to say, oh, it's not you we don't trust, it's the rest of the world. And instead of me taking it as a compliment, like, oh, my parents trust me, I was like, oh, what's wrong? Why should I be afraid of the rest of the world? What's wrong? Why shouldn't I trust the rest of the world? Again, this is my personality trait. You may have gotten the same message and been like, yep, whatever. You know what I mean? It just depends. So now I'm going out in the world and I'm anxious. I don't feel like I fit in. I'm also the youngest in my grade, so I'm kind of developmentally a little bit behind some of my peers, right? So I'm the youngest in my grade. Life goes on, let me think about this. Oh, another thing that was really pivotal, I'll never forget my next door neighbor. She was a year younger than me. And we used to play outside all the time. We were like friends and whatnot. And it was the summertime and we were with a bunch of kids. And my next door neighbor, Susan, took her shirt off because it was really hot. And I was like, oh God, I'm gonna take my shirt off. And somebody said to me, Karen, you're too old. You can't take your shirt off. You have breasts. I'm sure they use the word boobs, but. And all of a sudden I was like, wrong with what's different? Why does she get to? Suddenly I was recognizing like bodies are different and I felt very embarrassed. And I was like, okay, so I put my shirt back on and I was very, very ashamed and embarrassed. I was also, because I'm the youngest and the only girl, I didn't ever want to approach my parents about anything like sex or intimacy or anything. So I don't know what they're like nowadays, but 30 years ago, Playboy, Hustler, all those magazines, to a young mind and probably to an adult mind, are very violent. Women are not portrayed in a very nice way, shall we say. That's how I learned about sex. I snuck into my brother's rooms and I went under their bed and I opened up their Playboys because I didn't know how to ask. I didn't know how to ask about intimacy, anything like that. And I assumed that all my friends, it seemed like all my friends got it. And I was like, I don't understand this. Oh, I know, I'll teach myself. So what I was witnessing was violence. The women were usually portrayed in a violent situation. So sex became terrifying for me. So now I'm walking through life with all these like little things that, again, no big deal, right? But when you start collecting them, and this is how my psyche's born, created, and I'm walking through the world, I was very insecure. I started getting a lot of depression. I'm sure you guys have all been like, oh, how's everything going? I'm fine. Have you all been said, that? By the way, do you guys know what FINE stands for? When somebody says to you, how are you doing? And you go, I'm fine. It really means I'm fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. That's what FINE really means. And I spent my whole life being fine. I'm fine. Because I wasn't. I was fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. But that was not what society expects. This is why when we were talking earlier about community, like the sorority, community, supporting each other, I didn't find that when I was younger. By the way, it was probably there, but I was too insecure to see it. So part of it is just like my own perception of life. So let's see. So we're give me a second. We're at, hang on. Okay. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm not a professional. As you can tell, I'm like. Dun, 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 dun. This is another reason why I didn't feel like I fit in. Like, oh, that's another thing. So remember I said, like, I assumed I grew up in this world with, like, you know, everyone had blonde, stick straight hair and really thin bodies. So I did everything I could to fit that stereotype. I straightened my hair. I bought clothes that were not comfortable for me, but they were the in style. Like, who just said that they liked my necklace? You did or something? Yeah. Like, I finally, as I got older, was like, what everyone else likes. This is my style. This is me. And this is what makes me feel good. I don't dress like other people. It's just who I am. So moving forward, now remember, I learned about sex through Playboy magazines, which is, you know, and I literally left the 10th grade, super flat, underdeveloped, hadn't really gone through puberty, because again, I was really, really young for my age. And I developed over the summertime. And when I got into the 11th grade, I started getting tons of attention for my chest. And all the guys were like, whoa, look what happened to you over the summertime. And all I can think of is Playboy magazine, Hustler. Oh my God, what are they gonna do? Why are they? So do you see what I'm saying? These are little traumas, right? That the world doesn't know about. I wasn't actually in any danger. I wasn't literally. In my mind though, I was like, something's not right. I don't like this. This is really, really scary. And again, it goes back from all these other messages that I'm getting, excuse me, or that I'm perceiving. I should also say I grew up in a very diet household. My mother modeled when I was younger. My mother was a Weight Watchers instructor. By the way, diets don't work. Just want to give you that. I'm going to tell you the end of the story. Diets don't work. And I grew up in a household where everything was like fat-free, you know, this, what, like skim this, fat-free, whatever. So it was sort of ingrained in me. And there was a lot of criticism. My father was overweight. My mother was very unhappy about it, so I assumed that weight is bad. And, you know, again, all my perception. Something that was really also pivotal is, and again, oh, I love you, Mom, so much. She never wanted me to have a big head. She wanted to kind of keep me grounded. So my mother used to say to me all the time things like, you're beautiful. I mean, you're not like model beautiful, but you're pretty. You're smart. You're not like MIT smart, but you're smart. You're funny, not like a comedian, but you're funny. And all my brain heard was, you're ugly, you're stupid, and you're boring. Because somebody that has low self-esteem, that's all they draw from everything in life. What are the negatives? What are people saying about me that are negative? So, again, we fast forward. I think I'm up to date. And then I got to college. So by the way, have you heard me say anything yet about dieting? About eating disorders? No, haven't even started. I don't even know what an eating disorder is at this point, at this stage in my life. So I go to college, and it was a very difficult transition for me. I was not old enough, excuse me, I was not mature enough. And I went, as I said, with tremendous anxiety and depression and low self-esteem. And so you put someone like that in a college environment, right? And it can be very, very difficult. Things are happening, family dynamics. I literally come up with this idea one day. My whole life, all I want to do is lose 10 pounds, right? Isn't that like something that people say all the time? Oh, if I could just lose 10 pounds. And I thought, you know what? Let's give it a shot. I had actually never even been on a diet. This is when I was in college. And I went on a diet, and all of a sudden people started saying, my God, you're so cool. You have such self-control. And I'm like, are you saying complimentary things to me? Oh my God, look at your body. Oh my God, look at how much weight you're losing. Oh my God, if only I could. And I was like, wait a minute, are people like jealous of me? Because my whole life, I saw it that I was jealous of others. Everyone else had the answer. Everyone else had the instructions to life. And now people are like, how did you do it? So by the way, when you feel badly about yourself and people start complimenting you, side note to this conversation, do not comment on people's weight. You do not know why they've lost weight, why they gained weight, why their weight is staying. It is not our business to comment on anybody's body type. So I'm getting compliment after compliment after compliment, and all of a sudden, I'm thinking so much about food, calories, working out, all this stuff. I forget that I'm insecure. By the way, notice I said forget. I didn't resolve my insecurity. I forget that I'm insecure. I forget that I have intimacy fears. I forget that there's family issues. I forget that I don't feel like the smartest. See what I'm saying? So this is what happens with an eating disorder. Your entire focus goes into this one thing. This is why I always say to my clients, can you imagine what you could accomplish with all the time and energy you spend thinking and doing your eating disorder? It'd be amazing. And one of the reasons why I love talking at colleges is because I don't remember college at all. And it is not because I was partying, it's not because I was doing drugs, it's because I was in my eating disorder mind and behaviors the entire time. I don't have any college friends. My high school friends are like, oh, me and my college friends were going away for a weekend, and I'm like, I don't even know what that's like. I have no idea. I went to Emerson, right across the water. So I got so heavily involved in my eating disorder, and regardless of what the disorder is, whether it is restricting, binging, purging, over-exercise, laxative abuse, like whatever it is, it will start taking over your brain. You will start using behaviors to the point that it literally can change brain chemistry. Now, you can always change that back. That's what neuroplasticity is, right? So you can create new brain grooves. But you will start changing your brain grooves. So finally, like one day, somebody said to me like, my God, you look awful. And I was like, really? Because I finally feel good. I had numbed myself out. I had made myself look like a prepubescent boy, so that takes care of intimacy, right? I had to be taken out of college and back home with my parents. That took care of my adulting fears. I focused on nothing but recovery, which helped me, so I didn't have to worry about my social status or self-esteem. So often the eating disorder, or whatever disorder it is, it has a function. It's why I say on my website, I was never afraid to die from an eating disorder. I was afraid to live in the world without one. Because if somebody was approaching me and I thought they were going to become intimate, I'd like hide behind my eating disorder cloak. I'd be having conversations with people and just be in my head like, okay, so I had this for breakfast and this for lunch and da-da-da-da-da. I could have a whole conversation with myself. And by the way, anything that makes you feel good for a moment is eventually going to make you feel bad, but then you're going to want to feel good again, so you're going to do something different. So it's a really hard cycle to get out of. So I am trying to think. So for me, what happened? So by the way, did you hear this whole story? Whew. Behaviors start here. I have this whole history that I have to work through. But by the way, it's not impossible, right? It's called working through your life. So what I had to realize is that I had to go to therapy. Like 30 years ago, they did not have treatment centers. So I did it on my own. My family helped me. I cried through it. By the way, I will also tell you that recovery is not that It can be very messy. And usually people with eating disorders don't want things to be messy. I would cry in restaurants if they served me something that I thought wasn't, they didn't prepare it correctly or whatnot. The bottom line is my entire life became my eating disorder because I thought it was taking care of everything. And it wasn't until I went to therapy and I started being honest and saying, I suffer from anxiety, I suffer from depression, I suffer from intimacy fears. I don't know why I have low self-esteem. I don't know why, keep going. And so I had to go through, and by the way, it doesn't take as long as all this. You're not like, okay, your one's gone, whew, now let's start the next thing. So what happens though is you start understanding your life. You start understanding the patterns that have been created and why. You understand where uncomfortable feelings come from, and you also learn to reach out for help. By the way, I'm giving you the very condensed version, right? I'm like, so low self-esteem, and then I'm like, eating disorder, and then I'm like, recovery. It doesn't work that way, right? It takes a really, really long time, because look at all the stuff that I had to navigate through, that I had to work through first, right? While also working through behaviors. Something I will tell you that is, I was very lucky, and I'm going to encourage anybody who's struggling, get help now. I had a really fast and furious eating disorder. It hit me, and it hit me hard, but I had a much better success rate for recovery because I got help right away. If I had waited years and years, it takes longer to recover. And I'm not saying that to make anyone who has been struggling for years and years and years, full recovery is possible. But the sooner you get into treatment, whether that treatment is therapy, residential, whatever it is, the better chance you have. And so the hardest part for me when I was my sickest was about a year. Usually they say between like 1 and 3 years. If you can catch it in between there, it's a higher rate for recovery. It is not an impossible rate for recovery though, if you do it in year 10 or you do it in year 7. So I would also recommend, no matter what, go get help, talk to people. Everything that I struggled with to some degree, at least one person in this room can say, I struggled with that, I struggled with that. We live in a culture where, again, we think everybody wants to hear us go, I'm fine. And that's not who we are. I also don't want you like walking down the street and saying to somebody, I'm so sad, can we talk about this? I mean, there has to be healthy boundaries, right? But there has to be friendships where you can say to somebody, I am really not doing well. Can we go have a cup of coffee? Because I really need someone to talk to. And also, just because somebody doesn't understand eating disorders, so I've had clients say to me, like, but none of my friends know anything about eating disorders. I'm like, what? They know everything about eating disorders, except for the one thing that you're stuck on, which is the behaviors. Because your friends know what depression feels like, your friends know what anxiety, like, to some degree, everybody knows what it feels like to feel left out, to be afraid of it, whatever it is. So you don't go to a friend and start saying, like, I want to talk to you about restricting and binging and purging. You go to a friend and you say, I am not feeling good about myself. Can we talk? Like, I need someone to talk to. If you talk about all the underlying stuff, that's called connection. That's called vulnerability, right? That's just called being human. There's a lot of resources here in the Boston area. Thank God everything has gone virtual. One of the things about the pandemic, and I will never say there's a good thing from it, but virtual has gotten much more accessible, and that is phenomenal. And I'm going to encourage anybody who doesn't have access to a car to get to treatment, or doesn't have can't fit it in their schedule. You can get therapy now, almost 24 hours a day. So there really should be no excuse. I definitely feel like I sort of ran through this story and then was like, I'm done. Obviously it wasn't that easy, but I want to see if there's any questions, like what, or anything that somebody wants to talk about, anything you want to resonate with. And if not, I can talk forever. So don't worry about that. Any thoughts? Would anybody have the courage, which again, it shouldn't take courage to be able to ask a vulnerable question. I want to invite you up. Is there something any of you want me to talk about? Like, is anyone sitting there being like, I don't know enough about, or I have a question about, or my friend struggles with? Yes.
If you suspect that a friend is going through an eating disorder, like, what should you do in that situation?
What should you do when your friend's struggling?
Oh, when you suspect it.
When you suspect. So, by the way, it's a sensitive subject, right? And I also, again, I'll use my own experience. If anyone ever approached me, I'd be like, what are you talking about? I'm totally fine. Because I was afraid to give that up, right? Because if I let people know that I had an eating disorder, then I'd be giving up what I thought was really my mythical superpower, which is not. It's called destruction, self-destruction. But if you go to your friend and say, I just notice, you're not as, you're sad, or I notice that like you're never joining us in the dining hall, or you used to stay up all night and study with us, and now you're sleeping all day. Pick up things that you notice that person isn't going to feel like they have to defend it, and they still may. But all you have to do is just say to somebody like, I'm here if you need anything. Like, how come you never come to those sorority events anymore? I'm noticing that. Are you okay? I just want to check in. We don't have to make it such a big deal, and I think people are so afraid of hurting someone's feelings or stepping over their boundaries. By the way, you might step over someone's boundary, they will let you know, and that's okay too. That's where they are in their process. That doesn't mean that you still can't say something, because the other thing is, they'll eventually remember it. They'll think about it. To this day, I still have like moments where I remember when that friend or that therapist or that aunt or whatever told me something, and I wasn't ready to hear it then, but I remember it now. And so as long as you speak to people with compassion, no judgment, authenticity, that's really the best you can do. What else? What other questions? Yes?
I guess I was wondering, like, how do people tell when they're, like, fully recovered, per se? Like, it might not be something clear-cut, I guess.
It's an awesome question. I get that all the time. So recovery is different for everybody. And so, by the way, I personally define full recovery as I will never, ever go to food, exercise. I've used laxatives in my eating disorder. I would never go to an eating disorder behavior to think that it's going to solve something. So basically, instead of looking away from life now and saying, you're not there, I'm gonna take laxatives, I actually look at it and say, what's in front of me? I'll give you an example. My father passed away about 17 years ago, and gratefully, I was fully recovered. And I say it like that because I was able to be present in the last 3 months of my father's life. There was no eating disorder behavior that was going to change the prognosis. My father had brain cancer. There was no amount of laxatives, exercise, restricting that was going to change the outcome. And thank God I was aware of that, because then I could sit with my family while it was happening, and I could hold my dad's hand. We could all grieve together while it was happening. See what I'm saying? This is like how, as a recovered person, you basically, one of the things you do is you can actually, you deal with life on life's terms. And it's not always comfortable, right? Part of an eating disorder is like, I don't feel it. But it's not comfortable, but you still do it anyway. Also, and you guys must have heard this 1,000 times, there is no such thing as good foods and bad foods. There's really not. By the way, broccoli is a good food, but if I had broccoli for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that's a pretty bad eating habit, right? So there's no such thing. If I want to go out tonight and have burgers and a milkshake or whatnot, okay, but if I have burgers, milkshake, french fries every single day for 3 meals a day, well, that's just a bad eating habit. Food should not have energy unless it's like that loving energy, like you're sharing food with people that you love. You're making food, it smells good, it tastes good. Food should have a proper place. Food is spiritual, food is relational, it is what brings my whole family together during the Jewish holidays. Like, food is cultural. So when food has to have its proper place. That means that you don't binge on food to ignore your problems. You don't restrict food. You don't do anything. Food has its proper place. By the way, overeating is part of life. There's nothing wrong with it. How many times have you guys sat down and you're like, not hungry, but man, there's like ice cream and popcorn here. Awesome. There's nothing wrong with that. Our culture says, like, don't eat if you're not hungry, or only eat your 3 meals and 3 snacks. Fuck that. Sometimes you go out and you have a good time and you overeat because it's really, really, really good. But you don't wake up the next day and compensate. So if you were in your eating disorder, you'd compensate. And I'm not saying you, I'm just saying you. You compensate. So food has its proper place. Same thing with exercise. Movement. Like, movement. I abused exercise so much when I was in my eating disorder. Movement is supposed to be joyful. We're supposed to like feel our bodies. We're not supposed to, ruin our bodies on a treadmill. And by the way, there's a time and place for everything. If you like to exercise and it's a blizzard out, okay, use the treadmill. But if, again, like the broccoli and the cheeseburger, if you're running on the treadmill 10 hours a day or 4 hours a day, well, then you're just not using it appropriately. You have to think about what is your intention behind everything. What is the reason that you're doing things? And if you're doing it because you want to numb out feelings, or it's giving you a false sense of I just forgot my word, a false sense of high self-esteem or whatever, forgive me, I just lost my word, then you're doing it for the wrong reasons, because it's never, eating disorder behavior is just like substances. It never works, which is why you keep doing it more and more and more, because you're like, I'm almost there, I feel like I'm almost there. But then you have to do it again, because you had that good feeling for a second, and then you have to do more and chase more. And so it just doesn't work. I feel like I went off on a little tangent there, didn't I? I sort of went all over the place on that one. What are some other questions? Oh, no, you're right there.
This might be kind of personal, but like, how have you dealt with the fact that there are parts of your life where you were just like basically not there because you had eating disorder, and like I feel like that's kind of a sad thing to think about. So I'm wondering how you deal with that, this lack of memories.
It is. Like I said, I went away with my 2 high school girlfriends a few weeks ago, and again, they were talking about their college friends, and yeah, we do this, and I'm thinking, what is a college friend? Like, really? And so, by the way, yes, there's a lot of sadness in that. There's a lot of stuff that I couldn't enjoy, that I couldn't focus on. I was either physically too sick, because eating disorders are so detrimental on your body. I was emotionally too sick, so I was physically there, but emotionally I missed all of it. And, now I'm a narcissist and I have a fucking fabulous life. I don't know, I turned it around and I was just like, seriously, you get to a point in your life where you're just like, what have I done? I've been living my life under these ridiculous values that actually are not congruent with my real values. Because my real values are love. You can't love when you're in an eating disorder. Honesty. I'm not a liar, but I lied all the time in my eating disorder. Connection. You cannot connect. So when you get out of the eating disorder and you're like, I spent all this time with no love, connection, I was lying, you sort of, or at least I did, and again, after years of work. So I want to be very clear, we only have an hour for this talk, otherwise I tell you the whole, but now I live life fully. I am fully engaged in my life, because, and maybe maybe that's because of what I sacrificed. Maybe I feel like who I am today is who I was here, but the messages I got was that this is not okay. And I went, okay, I'll change it. Now I'm over here and if people are like, this is not okay, I'm like, that's your problem, not mine, because this is who I am. This is me. I'm very loud. I'm very expressive. I'm very passionate. This is who I am. And it's okay if Charlotte, I'm gonna use it. Charlotte, if you don't like it, my heart will hurt, but that's my issue. I have to deal with my hurting heart because Charlotte doesn't like this. Charlotte, how dare you? But my alternative is manipulating at the cost of my emotional and physical health to fit in, and then I'm back here, right? I'm sort of back here because I'm not present anymore. I also want you to all be sure to understand, and by the way, medical fears did not scare me at all. Like doctors are saying to my parents, like, she's gonna be walking down Ave next week and like that drop dead from a heart attack. And I'm like, Mom, she's being so dramatic. So here's a little story and then I'll go into what it was. So I'm home, I'm at my parents' house, I'm taken out of school. And I woke up one night at like 3 in the morning and I literally felt like there was like a boulder on my chest. By the way, I was probably having a panic attack. I didn't know at the time. And I thought, oh my God, I am having a heart attack. I am gonna die. My parents are gonna come in my bedroom tomorrow morning and I'm gonna be dead from a diet. Which, by the way, it's not that simple, but I'm gonna be dead from my eating disorder. And I tried to like lift my arm and like bang on the wall. And I was like so paralyzed with fear, I couldn't do it. And I was like, if I get up in the morning, I'll never do this again. I'll never do this again. I'll never do this again. What do you think the first thing is? I did. I like started my day with eating disorder behaviors because I didn't know how to then process all the anxiety that I had the night before, except for using my eating disorder. I was like, whew, got by that one. How can I deal with all this nervousness, all this fear? So I used my eating disorder to make me feel better from thinking that the night before I was dying from my eating disorder. And it's important that you know that eating disorders are the second deadliest disorder. So there's opioids, so substance abuse, but specifically opioids. Eating disorders are right underneath. I've had a lot of people on my show, on the podcast, well, not a lot, but I've had 2 different parents who have lost their children to eating disorders. I've had people that are on the podcast talk about friends that they had lost to their eating disorder. It is a deadly, deadly disorder. I also want to say I have clients that have been in their eating disorder for 30 years and they still show up for treatment. As long as you have some little flicker, like if there's that much in you that's like, I don't want this. Because by the way, I didn't want the eating disorder, I wanted what I thought I was getting from it. So I always say to my clients, whatever you think the eating disorder is providing for you, I want you to have that too. If you want to have high self-esteem, I want you to have high self-esteem too. If you want to feel like you are good with intimacy, I want you to feel like you're good with intimacy too. If you name it, I want it too. I just want you to get it from a place that you're not costing your life, your physical, your emotional life. There's other ways of getting there. And that's always possible. You can always find ways of getting there. You're never going to get there using it from the eating disorder. There was something else I was going to say. Wait, hang on. Someone asked me a question because now I can't think. Go ahead.
So you mentioned like some problems that you had that you wanted.
I'm sorry, say that one more time. Some what that I wanted?
Problems that you had, like I guess insecurities that you had.
Right.
And you thought like the eating disorder would help you resolve, but didn't. And assuming that you worked through it throughout your life, what are some things that actually did help?
Part of it was I do a lot of self-talk. I also want to say that being fully recovered does not mean that I don't go through moments of insecurity. See, that's the other thing. That's the other reason why I did the podcast, because I had someone come into my office once and was like, somebody told me that once I was fully recovered, my life would be perfect, and it's not, so I'm doing recovery wrong. And I'm like, you were lied to, because no life is perfect. So there are days when I still have insecurity. There's days when I have body image distress. There's days when I feel less than. That's a human experience, but it's what I do that's different. I talk to myself a lot, and I say to myself what's actually happening, because typically if we ask, there's something underneath it. I have a lot of self-compassion. I'm a crier. I love to cry. Crying, I think, is a great thing. I have many people in my life that I can pick up the phone and say, I am not having a good day. So a lot of it is communication. A lot of it is also trying really, really, really hard to sift through all the crap that we're bombarded by. You are bombarded by social media, expectations, all of these demands, and we take it all on to the point that we're like falling over. It took me a long time to get media literacy where I understood that this was all, this is not real. And unfortunately, and this is the other thing that's difficult, I can get it now, right? So like I can say, I get it, airbrushed, or these models, you know, have eating disorders, whatnot. Unfortunately though, the rest of the culture doesn't think that way. So they still look at these ads and go, oh, that's the ideal person. That's what we're supposed to look like. That's what I'm looking for in a partner, in a friend, and whatnot. And one of the things that you have to, you don't have to, but I encourage you to do, is remind yourself, like, push out that noise. Really push out that noise, because at the end of the day, people in my life do not love me because of the size I am. They don't love me because of my accomplishments. They love me because of my heart, because of who I am, because I'm a little silly, I'm fun, you know, all these things. Has nothing to do. They don't love me because of my career. They don't love me because of how I did in school. We have so many pressures put on us, and it's really hard. I'm not gonna lie, it is hard to like walk through diet culture, walk through the expectations, especially of college. I mean, my God, you guys are at MIT. I'm sure there's a lot of pressures. By the way, do you guys know what GPA I had in college? No, because I'm 53 years old now, and it doesn't matter, right? And so sometimes I just want to put things in perspective, right? So I'm not invalidating. You guys are in a super high pressure position right now. Of course you want to do well. I'd be lying if I was up here being like, oh, fuck it. By the way, I never asked if it was okay if I swear. I've been swearing since like,
You are fine.
Right.
Go for it.
Anyway, but I mean, I wouldn't be being realistic if I was like, don't worry about it. It's not going to matter. But to like have compassion for yourselves. Do you know what size I am? No, it doesn't matter. These things don't matter. What matters is I worked through all of my emotional turmoil, and I am here today as this person, regardless of my GPA, regardless of things like that. So you have to push those things aside. Again, easier said than done. I have a lot more freedom to say that because I'm not in college anymore. I'm not in some of the positions that you guys are in, wanting to go to graduate school or whatever it is. So I never want to invalidate the pressures, but it is never worth the cost of self to look a certain way, feel a certain way, get certain grades. You're gonna be okay just by being human and open and honest, and you're all, I hate to be like you're all exactly where you're supposed to be at this time in life, but you're all exactly where you're supposed to be at this time in life. It is what it is, right? What are some other questions?
What are, sorry if this is like ignorant, but
No.
what are some like...
Come on, did you just hear my talk? There's nothing is ignorant, come on.
So what are some like eating disorder behavior / thinking patterns? Because often they're not like physically visible, but they're like thinking patterns that you tend to fall into?
Yeah.
Like, what are those behaviors like, which, like what to look out for in
Yeah.
terms of when you know that you might be in that?
Yeah, and I'm glad you said it because you asked that question, because I also want to say, I think you commented something about physical, I can't remember what it was. Thank God our field is changing, where you can be in a much larger body and still be diagnosed with anorexia nervosa. It is no longer the stereotypical of what somebody with an eating disorder looks like, thank God. It's the same with all the other, bulimia nervosa, orthorexia, like gratefully, thank God, we're starting to get out of that paradigm. So it is about thought patterns. Are you ruminating all the time on what you ate? Are you ruminating about what you can eat because you don't think you can get your papers done, so you're just like, I just want to eat, are you ruminating about diet, weight, and exercise so out of proportion that it takes over you? I was like this in my eating disorder. So right now I can only see you. I couldn't see any, like, look at all these other beautiful souls in this room. I can't see any of them. So when your world becomes so small, and I hope you catch it before it gets this small, but when it gets really, really small, and you're like, yeah, weight, calories, exercise, yeah, binge, purge, yeah. You know what I'm saying? When it starts taking over, also, you don't even have to wait until thoughts get like that. Like, before that, what's happening? And now I'm just gonna use you. Like, are you feeling depressed or overwhelmed? Go talk to somebody. And again, if you don't feel comfortable talking to friends, you can reach out to therapists. There's always, but if you're noticing that the majority of your day has food thoughts, thought patterns, whatever it is, if you're noticing that I just missed 20 minutes of this whole conversation because I was thinking about what I had for lunch, then do you see what I'm saying? That's something where you're like, wait a minute, everything should be in its place. You should be fully present here right now. Not thinking about other things, food, weight, calories, whatever it is. And so when it starts becoming intrusive, then there's something that needs to be, you need to talk about it. What else?
I just want to check Zoom really quick to see if anyone has questions.
Oh. She's probably like, oh God. I'll take a sip of water.
Does anyone in Zoom land have a question? You can speak or send it in the chat.
Thank
If
you.
not, that is also okay. I just wanted to give you the chance, I think.
Yeah. I have my card up here, and I'm not like, here, you be a client, you be a client, you be a client, you be a client. I'm just like super passionate about it. So if you guys have any questions that you don't feel comfortable asking now, just email me or call me. I don't do this work for the financial gains. I do this work because it's my passion. I hate the fact that people suffer in silence. I hate the fact that people are ashamed and think there's something wrong with them, but they don't. So reach out to me. I'm happy to either guide you in the right direction, help you with a concept that you have. So again, don't feel like if you didn't ask it today that you can't reach out to me. Obviously I like to talk, so I'll be like, I'm a talker. So what else? Anything?
Kind of similar to the question Serena asked a while ago. If you have a friend and you suspect that something might be going on, if you know they have a history of an eating disorder, do you recommend, I guess, bringing it up, or just kind of the same approach where you just ask, I noticed these things.
What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just noticing. And you can also say, like, I'm noticing, like, I'm just asking, I'm just saying this because I love you and you're my friend. I know you had a history with an eating disorder. I'm not saying it's all who you are. Like, I'm not saying you're just your eating disorder from the past, but I know that you had an eating disorder and you're struggling right now. Are things coming up? Again, it's never about what we say, it's how you say it. If somebody said to me, today, like, I know you struggled with an eating disorder in the past, and I'm noticing that you're like, I would feel the compassion, like I'm just asking. But if someone was like, didn't you struggle in the past? And like, what the hell's going on now? I'd be like, are you kidding me? So it's about how we talk to people. It's about the level of compassion, because our souls were really vulnerable, right? And vulnerability and authenticity are so hard to do. But then once you start living your life from that place, it's hard to do it any other way. And so having compassion is really important. What else? Anything?
Is there anything that like we should maybe avoid saying, err on the side of not saying, because like it could trigger something?
I think that I would avoid pointing out if you saw someone's behaviors. Like, I would avoid saying, you know, I notice like there's a lot of food that's missing in our house. Like, you know what I'm saying? Because then you're pointing to their behavior, which could have shame. I'm noticing that like your food is like has mold on it. Like, and I don't know why I'm just going to food, so forgive me. Or I noticed something in the toilet. Whatever it is, you're going towards a symptom, and you're not. Friends aren't qualified to work through symptoms with other friends, and you're just dealing with a symptom. So if I have a client that I notice week after week after week after week, we're just doing crisis management, talking about symptoms, talking about symptoms, talking about symptoms, I'm like, wait a minute, what are we avoiding? What are we not getting to that you're very symptomatic right now? So it's kind of the same thing if you ask a friend about it. Like, those are things I would stay away from. Somebody else.
Yeah, if someone's going through like multiple things, like let's say eating disorder and anxiety or like something else, what do you normally recommend, like 2 different approaches, or do you recommend they only focus on like one thing?
No, I think so. First of all, and this is my own personal feeling just because I've been doing this for so long. If you are struggling with eating disorders, any behaviors, I would highly encourage you to go to an eating disorder specialist. Like, I've had years of training and years of workshops specifically on eating disorders, right? So it's not just that like I had one, like I trained under them. And so you really, really want to go to somebody specific. That being said, therapists that specialize in eating disorders have all the other training underneath that another therapist would have. So they know how to work through depression and anxiety and trauma and phobias and things like that. And so it's really going to the same person. Sometimes, I will say, sometimes I'll have a client and I'll say, you know what, OCD is really, really strong right now, so I want to incorporate an OCD therapist. Like, let's bring someone else onto the team. So there are times when you weave in other people, but you're still really dealing or working through the same stuff. It's just manifesting in different ways. Does that answer?
So like you said that like you shouldn't bring up their eating disorder behaviors, but what if they bring it up, like what if they're constantly texting you like, oh, I'm so anxious because I had too many calories today or something like that?
I would simply say, you know what, I think you need to go talk to someone. Like, I love you, you're my friend, but I don't talk about food is neutral to me. And by the way, this is me at, saying it now, but you can say to them, like, and say, what else is going on? Why are you talking to me about calories? Because it's really, again, about, even if it is about, I don't want to gain weight, okay, why don't you want to gain weight? I'm really insecure about myself. Oh, okay, now we're getting to some good stuff. You're insecure about yourself and you feel, and if you just are like, can I only talk about the calories that I ate, it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't, like I say to parents or supports all the time. I used to run residential programs, and during family weekend I would say, if your child, loved one, partner comes to you and is like, how do I look in this? Don't answer it. Because there's never going to be a right answer. If I say to you, you look great in it, but you're in your eating disorder mind, you're going to be like, oh, hell no. No. They're lying, they're saying it, da. And then if I say to you, oh, it doesn't look that great, your eating disorder mind, and forgive me, people, I look at people sometimes, so I don't want you, you happen to be right in the center. If you say, not that great, eating disorder mind's gonna go crazy. So don't comment again on people's weights, and don't get sucked into that conversation. It's like that. There's nothing you can say. What are you gonna say? How many calories did you eat today? Like, you see what I'm saying? There's really nothing you can accomplish by staying on that line of thinking, and you have to say what else is going on. I don't know how to help you with calories. There was another, go ahead.
I was gonna ask, like, you mentioned earlier about like pushing out the noise, especially like in media and like social media. And I was wondering like how you, I guess, build up that habit on social media, because like even if you know that everyone is just posting their highlight reels, like you might be tempted to also post your highlight reels, or like it's still like very.
By the way,
noisy.
I'm gonna say something you're all gonna be like, oh hell no. Stay off of social media. I'm serious. Like, by the way, I'm a very, like, I'm centered, I'm grounded, I know who I am. There are times when I look on Facebook and I'm like, oh God, my life sucks compared to everyone else. And so it's hard. You're right. The only things that you see on social media are when someone's like, smile. You know what I mean? You don't see the real thing. And so we then get bombarded by these images that everybody's life is nothing but good times, connection, love, or whatever it is, going traveling. Those are snippets. And if you're in a place right now where you don't have a strong enough sense of self to be able to see through it, then I encourage you to stay off of social media. I also encourage you to find things that are more supportive. There are really incredible activists that are out there, which right now their names are escaping me, but there are other sites you can go on that promote real life, full life, holistic life, not just the moment while you're like, so stay away from it. I'm going to be totally honest with you. If I'm not feeling great about myself, I do not go on Facebook. Am I also telling my age? Like, do you guys not do Facebook? I just realized, I was like, do you guys even know what I'm talking about? So you have to know yourself, and you have to take care of yourself. That's self-care for me. If I'm not feeling great about myself, my self-care is to monitor what I subject myself to, and only subject myself to things that are going to make me feel better about myself. It's kind of work, right? But life is work sometimes, and that's okay. It's not always easy. What else? Were there any other? I thought I saw. Maybe I didn't. Is there anything else you would all like me to talk about? I know it's 4:05, so that's MIT time, so it's been an hour. Is there anything else before we close? All right. Thank you so much for showing up. I just appreciate it, and I hope something resonated with all of you. So great. Oh, and listen to the podcast, because I have fun guests, like really, and again, it's not me, it's the guests. They're so much fun. So I just wanted to say that. Okay, thank you everyone.
Thank you so much.
You're
Karen.
welcome.
This is amazing.
I hope this was good.
Yes,
I like. I'm like, is this thing on?
Are you okay if I send everyone your email? They can come get a card. But we
Please.
also have a Slack group. So.
Please, and anyone that has a question, please don't hesitate to reach out. Can you maybe just put in the subject line MIT talk or something, just so in case it goes to my junk mail or something? So that would probably, I'd really appreciate that, because I'd like to help anybody that needs it. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, amazing.
Thank you. I hope, like I said, I hope it was what you guys were.
Yes, this is perfect.
Good,
Yeah,
good.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're
Thank you so
welcome.
much.
You're so welcome. Take care, everyone.